So, dear friends and colleagues, let me welcome you to the debate how to make Digital Services Act future-proof. My name is Milena Jaburková. I'm Vice President of the Confederation of Czech Industry, responsible for digital economy and education. And how to make DSA future-proof, this is really important and hot topic, because DSA will impact how we do business in the European Union for decades to come. And that is why we would like to make sure that Czech businesses, our members, contribute to this debate, and their views, comments, needs are reflected in the final shape of the Digital Services Act. Also, we are concerned that there are still large numbers of online companies that are not aware how much impact DSA will have on their businesses. So we would like to change that by raising their awareness of this issue. Let me say a few words about Confederation of Czech Industry position on DSA, and I will not go to the details because there will be a topic of this roundtable of our speakers. So, Confederation of Czech Industries welcomes DSA. There are a number of good innovations and uplift of old e-commerce principles that need to be modernized for digital era. However, we are still concerned about some elements that may cause unnecessary burden for businesses and companies, and some provisions are, in our view, still unclear and need more clarification. We believe in principle that we should strive for precision regulation, which means to solve the issue which needed to be solved, but to avoid one-size-fits-all principle that didn't work very well in the past. And now, let me welcome and invite to the stage Vice President of the European Parliament, Dita Charanzová. Dita is a politician I deeply admire for her consistency, perseverance, and passion in promoting, maybe it's better to say nowadays, defending liberal values in the EU politics and policies. One of her major achievements was free flow of data regulation, and she contributed, to the building a real digital single market in the EU. That's why we are very happy that she is shadow reporter on Digital Services Act, which we think is so crucial for businesses. And Dita, let me congratulate you for your recent elections of the vice president, of the vice chair of Renew Party. We need more Czech politicians with European and international leverage. So I hope others will follow soon. And now, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Milena, and good morning to everybody. Indeed, I'm very pleased for this cooperation that I have with the Czech associations. You've been always the voice of liberal approach, and indeed, I think we need to have a liberal approach and a liberal attitude also to this file. I've been given 10 minutes to summarize why we have DSA, what is the most important about DSA, and I found it impossible to really characterize everything in 10 minutes. Then we will have also panelists, experts on the topics. So let me be brief and highlight just the main issues that I consider to be the most important ones. First, I think we must remember that the DSA should be a horizontal law. However, from my reading of different pieces of positions, also papers coming from different member states, I have the sense that many companies and groups think of DSA as a way to get at the rivals or attack one sector in order to distract from another. I disagree with this approach. For me, DSA should and must be a horizontal law, as we had e-commerce directive so far. So for me, this is really the base of the house and not the house itself. We can have then different like specialists law where needed, vertical laws, if we want to, for instance, tackle the physical goods on marketplaces. So those special rules should be addressed in the General Product Safety Directive. The same logic applies for illegal content, terrorist content, sexual images. So the DSA sets the basis, and if we need to tackle the terrorist content, if we need to tackle the sexual images, we should do it in additional rules in their own pieces of legislation. This is why I'm not a big fan of the draft report that has been presented by the Parliament's rapporteur. I believe that in an attempt to go after one sector, we are harming the foundations of overall internet regulation. New liability exceptions rules that make it almost impossible to meet the requirements are just as bad as just deleting the liability requirements altogether. One last comment on the draft report, the Trump's case. The idea that someone like Mr. Trump would have greater protections and rights online than the average user should not be acceptable by anyone. We can talk about what the rules of account suspension should be, how we should deal with it, or what kind of terms and conditions should apply in a non-arbitrary manner. But why should one person get more rights than others? It doesn't seem fair to me, and I don't think it should be in the text. So now let me maybe come back to the actual proposal from the Commission, and I'm very happy that one of our panelists is actually the key player of this file. I have to say that I'm happy with the Commission's proposal as a starting point. It doesn't mean that I will not table any amendments. I will certainly do, but I think you got the balance almost right. I think more I speak to the different stakeholders and governments, I think you really try to keep the right balance where it's necessary. For all the changes that I would like to present, let me highlight three main points. One is that we must protect the country of origin principle more in the text. This means making sure that the provider's primary partner is their national digital services coordinator. At the same time, the digital services coordinator must continue to be able to act independently without unlimited pressure from other bodies. So I don't know why providers have fewer rights under DSA when addressing a takedown order for illegal content than they do for the same order or if it's related to terrorist content. I think we should harmonize the rules in the DSA with those pieces that exist in other legislation. including procedural rules from terrorist content online, e-evidence, B2B, and GDPR. Secondly, while I'm a big fan of transparency, transparency is only useful if it serves a purpose. To create a report that nobody reads is just a burden without any benefit. Similarly, making a website invest in expensive content management systems when the risk for those services is minimal will only have a negative effect on those providers. So this is why I think we must maintain Article 16 untouched. This is the exclusion for micro and small online platforms. At the same time, I would even go beyond Article 16 and introduce the potential of a commission waiver for all or parts of Chapter 3 to those websites, not only SMEs, but non-profits and other sites that have a positive benefit for society. And I'm thinking of Internet Archives, Wikipedia, etc. Lastly, I believe that the freedom of expression and other fundamental rights must be maintained. This means both for individuals, but also for providers. In almost every case, it is not for the state to decide what people can and cannot say. Nor should this be the decision of a foreign state or a third party. This is a decision of a community on a website. Are there limits? Yes, indeed. And this is why we make some items illegal. But for the rest, we must always protect liberties, even if there is a risk that comes with that. So with these messages, let me stop here, because now I would like to hear also from our distinguished panelists and experts. So let me invite them on the stage. Let me introduce them. So it's my pleasure to invite Mr. Pravat Agarwal, Head of Unit DG Connect from the European Commission. Nice to have you with us. Mrs. Miriam Estrin, Public Policy and Governmental Relations Manager at Google. Hello. Mr. Frederick Eriksson, Director, European Centre for International and Political Economy. Welcome. Mr. Michal Fakes, Regulatory and Public Affairs Consultant at CISNAM. Welcome. Mr. Jan Havlík, Head of Unit Internal Market and Competitiveness, Permanent Representation of the Czech Republic to the EU. Welcome. And Mr. Jan Vetishka, Executive Director at the Association of E-Commerce Czech Republic. Warm welcome to you too. So we have really limited time, as you know, so I will give you the floor now for your opening statements. You have 3 minutes, then we will continue with questions. I would also like to encourage the audience that they can raise your questions, comments in the chat, and I will happily take them on board. So we start with the Commission. Pravat, the floor is yours. You have 3 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Ms. Charanzová. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me. I can be very brief because I think you touched upon many very relevant and interesting points in your introduction. I think I just want to highlight perhaps 3 aspects. First of all, I think it's important to recognize the Commission listened very carefully to the European Parliament's preparatory works in the own initiative reports that were published in 2020, alongside with a very comprehensive public consultation, more than 3,000 contributions, and I would say also many years of work in the area of illegal content dating back to 2012, 2011, when the Commission started seriously thinking both about how to modernize the framework, but also to engage in a range of sector-specific initiatives that you rightly referred to, either be it unsafe products through the product safety pledge and illegal link to the illegal content recommendation, or counterfeit goods and the memorandum of understanding, but also covering areas such as disinformation or illegal hate speech online. And the Digital Services Act was informed by the experience from all these various initiatives and as well as the emerging new items that were not really tackled, including issues such as data access, the important issue also on online advertising, where there's been growing concern about both the business model, but also the opacity of these works. So the Digital Services Act, exactly like you said, Ms. Charanzová, was designed to be a horizontal instrument covering those issues that are really common to the majority of platform issues or intermediation issues in the digital economy as we see them today. So my first point, I fully agree that this is horizontal, and this was very much the intention of the Commission. But when we say that it is horizontal, I think it's also worth looking around a little bit to some of the other initiatives that the Commission has announced. I mean, one you've already mentioned is the review of the Product Safety Directive, where intense preparatory work is going on at the moment inside the Commission, but also other sector-specific initiatives, for example, on child sexual abuse material or on short-term rental accommodation. And sometimes we refer to these as plugins to the Digital Services Act. And I think maybe that's our internal work, but it's the other way that you've said it very nicely in your introduction is that the DSA is meant to be the foundation of the house. Some colleagues inside the Commission refer to it as the Grundnorm, as the kind of basic framework, and then we can build onto this. And this is very much also the logic of the e-commerce directive. I think this is my first this that is a guest in Brussels, so it's also appropriate to just have a little look at the international dimension of the Digital Services Act, which I think is one which is where we have been also very attentive to, and I think it's fair to say that we believe that the Digital Services Act is one of alongside the Digital Markets Act, certainly one of the initiatives that can very much be also part of our international conversations. I think we've had quite a lot of interest from international partners around the digital services, the ideas in the Digital Services Act, and we've had some very good conversations with major international partners on this as well. So I think today we look forward to seeing the interest around also the Trade and Technology Council and the platform dialogue that the Commission has offered, and I think this is also an important dimension to bear in mind, that there is an important international dimension to it as well. My third point is really more a process point, not so much on the substantive issues, because I think that the discussions are now in full swing, both in the Council and in the European Parliament, and rather than commenting on any individual amendment or positions in one of the reports or the Council's position, I think I just simply want to say that, we are really looking forward to engaging intensely in this debate, and today is a great opportunity to kick off these discussions, and we're really available to all parties involved to bring the data that we have, the knowledge from the area that we have, and our also expertise to the table, and to work constructively with all sides to come to a quick but also effective resolution and agreement on these things. So my commitment is just that we are fully at your disposal for technical and legal and details to iron all of them out. So hopefully the ambition to come to a timely conclusion on this file can be met. Thank you very much for giving me the floor first, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Robert. And indeed, you know that the Parliament has been already in contact with you and with your colleagues, because I think our intention is really to get it right, that we have future-proof legislation. So you have heard now from the Commission, from me, from the European Parliament, and it's now our turn to turn the attention to the businesses. So first, I would like to give the floor to Miriam. As I said, she represents Google. You are one of the companies that will be affected by this new legislation. So it would be interesting to hear your views. So over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me give that perspective from industry. And I think just to start, I want to say that we really do understand our responsibilities here. We have made strides over the years in content moderation, investing in cutting edge AI and machine learning technology. We have over 10,000 people working across Google to build out robust systems and processes for content challenges. And so when we read the DSA, it is with that experience in mind. And we really do want to be constructive in this debate. We are not resisting regulation. We really do want to work together on these shared goals. And I think those goals are to have a DSA that promotes a safe internet, an open internet, and a responsible internet. And so from the perspective of industry as Google, we want to ensure that the regulation provides us with the clarity for what is expected of services, that it has appropriate safeguards for fundamental rights, as we've discussed, both of services, and that promotes innovation in Europe. And I think we've seen during the pandemic just how vital digital tools remain and have become even more, with over 80% of small European businesses increasing their use of digital tools during this time. Or at Google, we saw over 6 billion meetings taking place on Google Meet for distance learning when schools were closed or for remote work. And so we want to make sure that in the years ahead, our services remain vibrant, they remain helpful, and that they indeed remain responsible, and that the DSA is a framework that can facilitate that for the years to come. So I'll stop there, but just to say I'm very much looking forward to that conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Eriksson. As I said, he is director at European Center for International Political Economy. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dita, and thank you very much for the invitation to come and join you this morning for this conversation, this dialogue on the DSA. By way of sort of setting out a couple of points from my side on the DSA, I'd like to highlight sort of a couple of themes where I have some worries, not necessarily about the DSA itself, but where sort of the totality of regulations, in what direction it's going, not just in Europe, but in other parts of the world as well. And also I'm going to sort of add on one point which concerns my view on the DSA more specifically. So my general point is basically a worry about what are we doing to the culture of freedom of speech in society. We have seen, as you know, lots of examples when known politicians like Donald Trump has been cancelled from social media platforms, for instance. We've seen sort of content moderation rules just in the past few days, which in hindsight looks very strange when they are applied. For instance, that Facebook went in to moderate views about whether COVID-19 was a man-made pandemic in the sense that whether it's escaped from a lab, which it sort of in the beginning of last year, it's decided to basically censor discussions that put forward that particular viewpoint. So this is my sort of general concern, that we are sort of going in a direction where big platforms, especially social media platforms, are censoring more and more. They are partly doing it on their own volition, but they're also pressured quite substantially from governments to do that as well. And the pressure, of course, comes predominantly by the threat of very large penalties unless they go ahead sort of with the type of moderation that some government sets out. Now, most governments, when they go into these issues, are not going to say that they are going to censor legitimate legal views. They're going to say that they are going to censor or moderate views that are illegal or sometimes when they are border on views that are harmful. When we look at the DSA itself, the DSA itself doesn't go into this particular discussion when it comes to content. It basically says that it continues with the concept of illegalities that exist predominantly in most sort of in the member states. But it does go in a direction where it puts a lot more pressure on the platforms to become a lot more active in terms of content moderation that may also include views that are certainly not illegal, or sort of views where we cannot say whether they are legal or not. And when you sort of get in with these type of pressures on platforms, the risk is that we are going to have sort of a stronger development that goes in a direction that limits the culture of freedom of speech. So in this sense, it's not that sort of governments are banning views to be expressed. It's not that they restrict the freedom of expression in a legal constitutional way, but they want to limit the capacity of platforms to be the distribution for these views to be submitted to different people. And for me, you know, coming sort of with a liberal view, I'm horrified by some of the views that I see being expressed on some of the platforms, but I'm still think we need to be extraordinarily careful of not now pressuring platforms to go even more in a direction of moderating different type of risks, systemic risks that may exist when it comes to views that are being expressed. And here I do have some concerns with the DSA. One other point, which is on the DSA more specifically, which is that I think one should be very careful with making distinctions between, in this case, large and very large platforms. The experience that we've had of 10 years now with increasing regulation on platforms is that the big platforms are extraordinarily skilled of flipping these regulations around and making them an entry barrier for smaller platforms that wants to get into the market and take up a larger market share. This we've seen sort of constantly now. It's been sort of running theme, not just in Europe, but in other parts of the world as well, where on the one hand, you can hear sort of from large platforms that they're going to, you know, balk or be think that sort of when new regulations comes, they're going to be unhelpful, but they have been extraordinarily skilled in flipping these regulations around to make it more difficult for new entrepreneurial platforms to come up and compete with them. And this is where I see the DSA is taking this concept of regulatory segmentation in a direction where I think it's going to be unhelpful for the broader business environment that we want to build, which is that we want to encourage competition. We want to encourage new entrepreneurship, new platforms to come up and that can offer either wholesale competition to the big platforms or niche competition to the big platforms. And the way the DSA goes right now, it's in my view unhelpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frederick. Indeed, you touched upon very important issues. I'm sure we will come back to them. But now let me invite next speaker, next representative also of industry, of business community, Michal Feix, Regulatory and Public Affairs Consultant for Seznam. Michal, over to you.
Thank you very much. A very good morning, Dita, and very good morning to everyone on today's event. Let me start by saying that Seznam, as the previous speaker said, is definitely the representative of one of those smaller platforms in a global scale. While Seznam is well known in the Czech Republic and Slovak Republic, being the largest online platform in the Czech Republic, it still is a small platform in a global scale and hits from time to time the barriers that are actually set up by the global players that from time to time tweaks the regulatory framework and creating the barriers as we just said. Seznam definitely welcomes the proposal of the European Commission, and together with the Digital Markets Act, we understand that this is an important piece of legislation that can fundamentally address a number of injustices that we've seen on the market or have arisen on the European market in the recent years. I think we've all seen several events during the past years, not just the investigations led by the European Commission, but also the events in the United States, where clearly only a small handful of very large platforms is actually able to shut down the communication of hundreds of millions of users with the President of the United States, which is clearly a signal that something's wrong on the market and needs to be fixed, obviously with a better regulatory landscape that we are building with the DSA and the DMA altogether. We definitely welcome the proposal as something that is not introducing a revolution in its design. It's basically extending a long, experienced e-commerce directive, which has been here with us for many years, and which shows that many of the principles that we see in the e-commerce directive are actually working. And it is great that the DSA is not trying to rebuild these principles from ground up, but is actually trying to build upon the e-commerce directive and extending several principles into today's world where we see several issues. It's great to see ideas like the Good Samaritan principle, which will definitely help platforms to better navigate in today's world of liabilities that is being put on platforms. This is great to see. Also very great to see parts of the DSA where the specific chapter 4 is actually focusing on very large platforms and brings specific obligations only on platforms from certain scale. As I said at the beginning, obviously the DSA and the DMA is something that we can call as something that has been long way coming, and clearly it's mainly about issues that we've seen in the past with large platforms or very large platforms that unfortunately might be seen as something as a source of the whole legislation set of activities that we see behind the DSA and DMA. So it's great that the DSA is not trying to address the whole market with one scale, but is actually distinguishing between smaller and large platforms and bringing different set of obligations on them. So definitely something we are actually welcoming, and we are very open for the future debates, especially with the Parliament, which is currently bringing its own set of large bunch of amendments, which also scares me in certain parts. But this is definitely something we will touch upon in the debate that is coming. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michal. Indeed, European Parliament will table a lot of amendments to it, but also the Council will be very active. And we have now the representative of the Czech permanent representation, the head of unit, Mr. Havlík, who is responsible for this file. So it would be interesting to hear your perspective from the Council. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Madam Vice President, and also thanks to the Czech Confederation of Industry for this, for adding me to this excellent panel. For the start, just very, very briefly, because I can agree with very much of what Dita Charanzová and Prabat Agarwal have said in the beginning on the horizontality of the file. It's almost as if we are forgetting that we are dealing with an e-commerce file primarily. And so all the issues that are connected to it, like freedom of speech and everything which has been also mentioned by the other speakers, those are extremely important issues, but they should be, we think, considered as secondary, or they belong to a specific legislation which is already on the table, or which which the Commission might present later. So for us, the primary optic on the DSA is, of course, the e-commerce part. And as the e-commerce directive has survived 20 years, intact, we can say. Now it needs an update. We all agree on that, and we actually like very much the basis of the file. Making it future-proof is by keeping it horizontal and simple, like Madam Charanzová said at the beginning. So that's pretty much it. And it shows that I have been in Brussels maybe for too long when I say that I really like the impact assessment the Commission has made. It sounds extremely boring, I know this, but it's all there, almost always there. Like Dita Charanzová was saying, you have different stakeholders coming with different ideas how to make the DSA better for different reasons. It can be good reasons, it can be bad reasons, but we are sort of slightly worried that if we divert a lot from what the impact assessment also shows is healthy and isn't, we might end up with a very different file. You can say it's like the Harry Potter mirror, where everyone sees what they want to see. So if you speak to the stakeholders, if you speak to the member states, if you speak to the parliament, everyone sees what they want to. And I think we are slightly missing the big picture, and that is that we need to set rules for digital services for the next, hopefully, at least 10 years. And if 20, that would be ideal. So for the introduction, I'll actually stop there with just one last keyword, and that's the Czech presidency. Of course, we are ready to start in the next summer with whatever is on the table, depending on how far the Slovene and the French presidencies are successful in the negotiations. But we are, of course, ready to take over, and naturally, by the time the Czech presidency takes over, we will do our very best to represent the Council in its entirety. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Havlík, and you also helped me to create an excellent bridge to our last speaker, because you said it should be all about e-commerce. So let me invite now the last speaker, Executive Director of the Association of E-Commerce from the Czech Republic, Mr. Vettiška. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Also, thank you for the invitation for this event. Let me say a couple of words about our association and who do I represent. We are here since 1999, and we represent and support e-commerce companies. Right now, we have 600 members, which cover more than 70% of Czech online turnovers in retail. We, as an association, we support them by the education, legal advisory. We provide also marketing-focused studies. But one of our very most important area is public affairs and cooperation with Czech state administration, government, and also cooperation with Confederation of Industry and e-commerce Europe in Brussels. Pardon. So regarding to DSA and today's topic, first proposal was very pleasant surprise for us, probably as was covered here in the introductions of our speakers. We participated in the public consultation of the European Commission. We are very happy that the European Commission has reflected the views of experts. For us, it was crucial that the principles of the e-commerce directive are preserved, as Madam Vice President said before and the other speakers said before. I also very support, and we as association, the country of origin rule. I think it was also very crucial that it's based on this principle also here in the proposal in DSA. Actually, we agree that after 20 years of e-commerce directive, there is necessary to make some steps forward and make new rules and adjustments. But I would appeal to members of European Parliament and Commission that they further steps and they carry on with respect to the existing online businesses and situation and rules. Because every time there is an additional administrative or legal obligations for platforms and the other businesses online, that as has been said here before, that many of them are following up also to the customers and consumers, and then can feel these changes in higher prices or limited access to the products, and that can be sometimes really ineffective and in the different way why all these rules and actually new adjustments are making. I think it was everything covered here before. If I can point out one more thing from the DSA proposal, I will point out to the definition of illegal content in Article 2. I think there is a kind of dangerous definition, and it can have unexpected negative effects, but I think we can discuss it furthermore.
Thank you very much. So let me thank all of you, and let's start to interact a little bit and have a discussion. So I would go back to you, Prabhat, because you said that you agree with my perception that it should be a horizontal instrument and we will have these plugins, as you said. But I wonder, you have seen what is happening in the European Parliament, that we are going further, that the rapporteur wants to go further with her proposal. So I wonder how much you are concerned. How much you are concerned that the DSA will not be just a horizontal piece of legislation. And second, also looking at the discussion in the European Parliament, you can see that there are proposals on an online ads, liability for marketplaces, recommender systems. So how will you make sure that that it will really fit in the objectives of the proposal of the European Commission, or where you see certain red lines on your side?
Okay, I hope to. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Ms. Charanzová. This is very good questions. So first on the, I mean, generally speaking, you know, the Commission doesn't like to give a running commentary on the deliberations in the Parliament, which I think are in the early stage. And as I said in my introduction, I think we are there to assist now to explain our proposals, but I think that these discussions are going on, and we look forward to engaging. And just on the horizontal versus the sector-specific rules, I think it's a little bit. You know, we try to make a sphere, you know, but the fact that the sphere becomes a little bit egg-shaped is not in itself a problem. I think we have some specific provisions in the DSA which have marketplaces in mind. For example, that know your business customer provision, which was specifically designed. Although we tried really throughout to make sure that the egg doesn't really become kind of too far away from the sphere shape. Sorry for the stupid analogy, but I was just looking for something to illustrate the point. But of course, at one point, if you change the shape too much, then it's better to have a second instrument for it. So there is a little bit of flexibility built into the DSA architecture, but not. I mean, there's a limit. Very detailed sector-specific rules should be in detailed sector-specific instruments, in my view. Now, I think, and some of the guiding questions that you can ask, or we can ask ourselves, just to as a constructive contribution, is this specific issue really a sector-specific issue, or is it something that is common to many platforms or many types of products? I mean, so for example, is it a product safety issue? Is it is counterfeit good? Are they also you know, e-commerce has many, illegal e-commerce has many facets, not only unsafe products, also, you know, wildlife trafficking, or we know that you know, we're working with many different departments inside the Commission on these things. So the design of the DSA was not necessarily to capture all of those specific issues in itself, but to extract the horizontal. And maybe here's one point that I wanted to make. It's actually quite surprising, and this is that a lot of these issues have a common thread, even though they appear as sector-specific at the first instance. Actually, if you look closer and you scratch below the surface, many of them have commonalities. And one great example is notice and action mechanisms. Every initiative on illegal content, whether it's counterfeit, illegal hate speech, or whether it's unsafe products, has some kind of notice and action mechanism built in. This is why we put it into the horizontal instrument. And so if you're only working in one particular subpart of this area, it might seem this is very sector specific. So this is maybe my question. But if it is varieties for the specific purpose of product safety, I think this is maybe better addressed in the sector-specific regulation that regulates that particular area. So I mean, this is not a hard and fast rule, but I think this is the way we are looking at it. At one point of detail, it's better to offload them, because you don't want to have 20 different chapters. Then it changes shape. I think this is also what you said in your in your introduction. On the discussions that are going on, I mean, we are following them with great interest. And you asked about our red lines. I think we are relatively clear that we don't have many red lines, but we have a few. I mean, the country of origin principle was already mentioned, which is for us really important. And I think that in the DSA proposal, we went as far as we could go to give flexibility to countries that are not the country of origin. And I think we still want to. We would be very concerned by a weakening of this fundamental principle of the internal market. This is for us a very important point, and I think there are legitimate conversations to be had about how to improve cooperation at a European level on common problems that we see across borders. But the basic principle of the internal market, I think, needs to be. We cannot have a situation with 27 or more different regulations that are all contradictory potentially, and this is also the line that for the European Commission continues to be a very important point. The second aspect that where we have deliberately, also after much reflection internally, also discussions with the highest political level inside the Commission, taken a view, is on the preservation of the basic principles of the liability exemption and the prohibition of general monitoring. And those are not; they have not been accidentally put down as boundaries of our proposal, but they are really deliberate choices, and they are based on really overwhelming support in the stakeholder consultation, but also very detailed studies and analysis of this. I think there have been some specific changes made to the liability of intermediaries in the copyright directive in a very specific situation and under very for a particular sector, coming back to the horizontal versus this sector-specific discussions, and after many intense discussions that I don't need to recall here, but I think that to transfer this approach.
I'm really sorry because time is running.
Yeah. I will. If you don't stop me, I will speak until tomorrow.
I know it's a fascinating topic, and you know all the details. But I would like to also give the opportunity to other speakers to perhaps also react to what you said, if they share your views. Indeed, I agree with a lot of what you said. I just wonder if we will have the majority in the Parliament to go in this direction. Miriam, of course, I will not ask about the red lines of Google, but it's crystal clear that your company, it's a major target of this legislation. You have said that you want to have safe and responsible internet. There are a lot of people calling that you should have also more transparent approach, that you should have more transparent rules. So what would be your reaction to it? And perhaps, are you concerned by some of the proposals coming both from the Commission and from the European Parliament?
Sure. So I'll start with transparency, which I think is actually a big opportunity for industry. So at Google, we have long prided ourselves on being industry leaders in transparency, putting out the first transparency reports of industry. You can look at our quarterly statistics on YouTube at the 9.6 million videos we removed, every quarter. But I think when it comes to meaningful transparency, we think that it can be insightful without being too inflexible, without risking our users' privacy, or without enabling bad actors. So, whether it's not disclosing trade secrets when we have algorithmic transparency, or giving a roadmap to bad actors for how to evade our systems when we are transparent on the kinds of technology and tools that we use. And so I think for the DSA, maybe it's worth looking at where can we add more safeguards, and how can we ensure that data is going to the right audience. So what's appropriate for the public may not be appropriate, or may be different for what's appropriate to the regulator. So that's my view on transparency. In terms of concerns that we're seeing in new drafts, I'll maybe flow from what Prabhat was saying about maintaining core principles like the prohibition on general monitoring. So I've seen in some of the proposals and in some of the debate a desire to erode that principle of general monitoring. And sometimes it's called by other names, like a stay down obligation. And, I think in practice, they're not different. So a stay down obligation very quickly becomes an obligation to undertake general monitoring because of two challenges. One is the scale of open platforms, where you have, for instance, on YouTube, over 500 hours of video uploaded every single minute. And also the limitations of technology, which cannot distinguish, still to this day, content in different contexts. So is it the swastika in a Holocaust documentary, or is it part of a neo-Nazi hate speech, or is it an Indian religious symbol? So the technology just isn't there yet. So I am concerned about the whittling away of those principles, and was very pleased to see the Commission reaffirm them. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, and I'm really sorry, but the time is limited, so I would have an extra questions, but let's move to the next panelist, Frederick. You already mentioned that you are afraid in what direction the discussion is heading, what can happen. One issue there is also not only how we frame the legislation, but how the legislation actually will be then enforced and implemented. So I wonder, what is your view perhaps on the establishment of new independent body called the Digital Services Coordinator that would actually be the body to implement and enforce the DSA? So, and do you think that the country of origin is sufficiently protected? As we heard from Robert, he was happy to get this right balance, but do you think it's enough?
I mean, I think generally I'd like to see more emphasis on the country of origin principle, and I take the point from Prabhat that sort of the balance set out in the proposal was pretty good. But as you also have referenced, Dita, I mean, we see a discussion in the European Parliament now. We have seen some of the viewpoints coming out from the member states which aren't helpful in this context, I think we are at serious risks of seeing sort of an erosion of the country of origin principle. And I think it's partly because it's difficult for some member states to prepare. I mean, I don't think they are prepared to accept where sort of the compromise position with 27 member states will be, and they would like to have flexibilities to act on their own, also on issues that are relevant sort of from a commercial point of view, and whether you can basically service other member states from one particular market. So I'd like to see much more emphasis on that point, and I'd like to see you, Dita, I'd like to see many others in the European Parliament that you take up this principle and make a very, very strong point of it. Because when I looked at the report that came out from the European Parliament just the other week, I felt that this is not really a good direction for the European Union to go. On the point of an independent authority, I mean, I think sort of it's. I mean, the devil is always going to be in the detail here. It depends on sort of what the exact scope for the authority is going to be, and how that scope is going to relate to issues where power now is basically distributed to the member states, and where member states keep the power in order to define what can happen inside their own territories. My worry is that we are sort of gradually eroding issues around openness and the culture of free speech. And if we think that we can defend those principles better by enshrining them stronger in EU law and having independent authorities that are competent and have the power to intervene on these issues, then I think it could be sort of generally a good way to go. But I don't think that's where we are going. I think we are going in a direction where member states are going to erode these principles even more, and that we are inevitably going to get into a point where this independent authority is going to have a very ambiguous mission, where it's going to be very unclear when and where it can act and where it cannot act. And I think that is going to add just more confusion and more ambiguity to the entire legislative framework that we have around these issues now. This confusion is growing by the day already, and we don't need more of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Frederick. Very interesting. I will now go to Michal from Seznam again. In your introductory remarks, you were quite positive. You said that you welcome the proposal, that it should not be revolutionary. But then I'm sure, as you follow the discussion in the Parliament, in the Council, is there anything that you are really afraid, any negative impact it could have on the businesses that you represent? For instance, I'm sure you have seen that, for instance, our rapporteur in the European Parliament categorized search engines as online platforms, which would have then quite a big effect on your company. So what would be your reaction?
Yeah, thank you for that question. This is really a great point. Let me start probably by reminding that my feeling of the DSA proposal, as it has been announced by the Commission, is that this is something really balanced kind of proposal, where I see many of the provisions very well thought, probably based on that very well written Inception analysis, which really finds a balance between what needs to be resetted from the e-commerce directive and where it's actually not necessary. And looking into the amendments, which we recently saw from the IMCO report or the draft report, there are unfortunately plenty of them. If I start with the search engines, definitely having search engines as part of online platforms without giving them a specific set of obligations that would be different from the global scale or global set of obligations that the DSA sets upon online platforms. This is something that makes me really worried, because I don't feel like search engines are just another online platform, which we can categorize in that very simple amendment that has been part of the draft report. It's just not that easy by simply adding search engines as these two words in the DSA, and that's it. It can't be that simple. So definitely more work needs to be done upon including the search engines into the scope of the DSA. We really need probably some specific set of category where only specific obligations that make sense would apply on search engines. And next to search engines, definitely the question of transparency. I mean, Miriam already said that the transparency has to be a meaningful transparency. Just producing tons of reports doesn't bring any kind of transparency to the market. And also, I think it's important to distinguish between larger and smaller online platforms. While smaller platforms don't usually have that many resources available to produce any kind of large transparency reports, this is way more easily done within the larger companies, the multinational ones that already have loads of resources to produce such reports, and also where such reports makes way more sense, because the outcomes of their doings is way more seen than when it comes to smaller platforms. The question on advertising and how this will be approached by the European Parliament when it comes to profiling super important for online companies and online platforms all around Europe, because definitely the attitude that we feel from inside the Parliament, from the draft report. This is really very aggressive approach on advertising and profiling. Definitely an idea of having a consent before being able to recommend anything to users as part of the provisions that are addressing recommender systems, also very important for online platforms. Is simply that would simply kill loads of online businesses all around Europe if this would pass in what we've seen in the draft report, and probably. Let me say that also the provisions that are trying to include smaller platforms as part of the definition of very large online platforms, by including also the quantitative criteria of having the turnover below 50 million, or above the 50 million euros. This is also very, very worrying, because that would include loads and loads of online platforms that would suddenly have tremendous amount of obligations that are being set in the DSA on very large online platforms. I think that level that has been set by the European Commission on 45 million users in Europe makes very much sense. And if you would like to extend these criteria, I think we should take the experience from the DMA proposal, where it's not just about users, it's not just about turnover, but it's also about the number of countries where these companies actually operate in. So if there should be some extension into the definition of very large online platforms, I would like to be consistent with the approach that is already taken as part of the DMA. So probably roughly in that short time that we have available, this is it.
Thank you very much, Michal. Indeed, and time is running out. To Mr. Havlík, you have heard a lot of comments from the industry. I know that the Czech Republic is quite vocal on the DSA. So could you perhaps sum up the key priorities of the Czech Republic? I know you have mentioned already some, but what makes the Czech Republic different from the other countries? Because we all read the position of France, for instance, and how you are associated, or if you manage to create some alliance with other countries on this topic.
Thank you so much for this question, Madam Charanzová. Well, to summarize, I think I would start with the harmonization effect of the DSA, because the Czech Republic, as you know well, is a big proponent of the single market, and so therefore, when the Commission proposed partial harmonization in some of the e-commerce rules, we definitely feel that is important, and this goes along with a really important risk I'd like to highlight here, and that's the risk of renationalization of rules. Because once we get into the debate that the DSA, it's too complicated, or it will never work, it's impossible to enforce, and so on and so forth, I personally think it will inevitably lead to a big pressure on renationalization, and that's not something that the Czech Republic would like to see at all on the single market, for all the good reasons that I'm sure I don't need to mention. For example, on the country of origin, I think it's fair to say that in the proposal of the Commission, this principle is already slightly deteriorated. Now, the discussion is, I think, whether this is a win-win situation or a lose-lose situation. A win-win situation would mean it hasn't worked in the e-commerce too well, so let's improve it. But let's keep the principle. That's a win-win. But the lose-lose is it didn't work, so we will dilute it even more and take it back to the member state level. So this is roughly one of the main points. Otherwise, it has also been mentioned by several speakers, and that's the small businesses. Now, if the elephant in the room is that we also want, we as Europe, sorry, Miriam, maybe, but we as Europe, if we want to also face international competition, but this is of course not the USA, but it's other countries, then we need to sustain our businesses, and our businesses are mainly small, as everyone knows. So for us, it is a bit strange that we are proposing to make rules for the very small more complicated. We find it very strange, but of course we're ready for any good discussion, we have just started on the discussion, so we're ready to continue this further. General monitoring goes along the same lines, and I think Miriam has explained this. The technology isn't there, so that's where we are. But I also mentioned the Czech presidency at the start, and for us, this is my own personal, my main perspective. If the Czech Republic has to take care of the file, we need to do this in the most fair way. So then we'll have either a choice between getting DSA done or getting a good text. And I would be personally hoping we can manage both at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Havlík, and thank you also mentioning the cooperation that we need at the international level. As you know, as we speak, that there are contacts now being developed between the EU and the US, how to move the digital agenda together forward. But that's for another discussion. Mr. Vetishka, we already heard from both Michal and Mr. Havlík that there must be a difference between large and smaller players. So you represent also a lot of SMEs, successful SMEs in commerce in the Czech Republic. So are they concerned? Are they afraid what's coming from Brussels? Would it have any impact on their business models?
First of all, before I answer the question, I would like to underline words of what Michal said about search engines as a platforms and about scaling the platforms. I totally agree with him. I also find that Jan is speaking very interesting, and I find his words also very important. About our members, we have to realize that in Czech Republic there are not so many large platforms. There's probably none. There are a couple of regular platforms, but how this will affect the smaller businesses indirectly, because we have to know that, as Frederick said before, that mostly platforms or the large companies, they find the way around the rule, or they find the way how to accept the rule and how to work with it, because they have many lawyers, they have capacity, they have people who work on it. But small businesses can be affected more indirectly, and it can be really barriers for them, as Frederick said before, to, for example, make new platforms, or also only to sell their goods and services on the platform, because there will be so many administrative issues and obligations for them that will be really a barrier for the selling, and also in the end the consumer will be affected by that. So that's also some kind of view, I think, that you need in European Parliament and Commission think about, that when we are making rules for the big companies in e-commerce business especially, we are affecting the small ones.
Thank you very much. I think it was also a good kind of concluding remarks of this discussion, that while we are focusing on the big one, we don't want to kill the innovation in Europe. We don't want to kill the smaller players in the European Union. Milena, I don't know if I have succeeded as a moderator, because I think we exceeded the time that was dedicated to this debate. But what is crystal clear, that we would need perhaps to have some follow-up discussion on this topic, as you have seen, and also the audience. It's a really interesting debate. There are different views, there are different perspectives, there are different stakeholders, different players, and I think Pravat actually must have enjoyed the discussion, because each and every single speaker said, well, the Commission's proposal was a good one, it was a good starting point, etc. We also agreed all that we must strike the right balance. And as always, the devil is in the details. So my promise is that I will try to keep this balance also in the discussion in the European Parliament. But let me, above all, thank the Czech Confederation of Industry to organize this event and trying to really also introduce this topic to the broader public and explain what is at stake with this new legislation. Melena, thank you, and over to you.
Okay, thank you, Dita, and let me thank you for chairing this panel. Let me thank to the panelists for open and constructive dialogue. Even though they are coming from different backgrounds, we sang in harmony because we agreed very clearly that the development in Parliament is not the most welcomed one. And there are some crucial things that need to be maintained, like horizontal approach, country of origin principle, prohibition of general monitoring, not to extend the scope on medium and small platforms or search machines, and also meaningful transparency rules, and avoid renationalization. I think that this is the illness Europe, together with protectionism, is suffering. We have to cure that, not worsen that. And also very important point that we don't live with the vacuum. We have to compete. We have to work with allies, and that's important to have really workable legislation that would build common space in Europe and put our in a good position vis-a-vis trading partners. And that's something we have to strive for, to have the DSA really future-proof. Thanks to you all, and I think that we all will be working together to do all our best to make this happen. So thank you, and have a great day, and thanks again for your time.